Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 49 of the Yakking Show, one away from our mid-century of 50. We talk about life, business, and more, and we bring you tips and ideas for the changing world we're living in, and it's certainly changing every day at the moment. As always, we have a lineup of interesting guests for you. Today is no exception, but first I must welcome my co-host, the beauty part of Beauty and the Beast on this show, and hello to Kathleen.
Oh, goodness, Peter. Thank you so much for that intro. And thank all of you for joining us. And we so do appreciate you tuning into the show. And as well, we appreciate your comments. So please keep them coming. And if any of you is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have a special guest. She's been with us before, and we're happy to have her back. Her name is Lucie Fournier. She is a personal coach, a business coach, a disability management coach. We'll get into that in a moment. But first, welcome, Lucie. How are you, Lucie?
I'm great, Kathleen. Thank you so much for having me back on again. I guess I didn't do too bad of a job the first time, right, Peter?
No, not bad at all. Quite a few views, and we all learned stuff, so that was
absolutely good. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lucie, why don't you start off by reminding our audience about what you do and a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. Well, I've been a registered nurse for over 35 years. But more recently, in the last 5 years, I've done Jack Canfield Success Principal coaching program. And despite coaching people for 35 years in my nursing field, I really wanted to focus on coaching as a little bit of a retirement type of business. And so I've gone into coaching, and I enjoy being with people and helping them make the next move in their life. And that's pretty much all there is to know about me.
Is coaching different now than it used to be?
I don't think so. The issue, I think, for me right now, just because of our global time, is that I think it's a really awesome opportunity to take advantage of coaching. I think people are kind of sitting back and waiting a little bit about making any moves in their lives, but it's I think a really grand opportunity now to make some changes. So I guess my answer is really yes and not necessarily no. But I think it's important that we're always, because we are changing on a daily basis, despite our global situation, we just need to keep making those changes as life goes on and not stop because we're in this situation.
good. What about your view on the changes that you have to make because of the pandemic that's coming on? Does that change your approach to coaching, Lucie?
I don't think so. I'm really keen on bringing clarity to people's lives. I think people have always had this underlying feeling that they should make some changes in their life, but it's always that should I, shouldn't I kind of thing, you know, and then we put it back on the back burner, and then it comes back to haunt us again, and should I, shouldn't I kind of thing. And I think really now's the time to just have a look at all that. I think we're in this situation now so that we can have a really good, realistic look of the situation we're in and make some good decisions. I mean, if we're still putting it on the back burner, that's okay, but are we looking at it is really the bigger question.
That's right. And from what I gather, talking to a lot of people, the current situation is motivating them more than ever to look at changes. And just one example, I'm seeing lots of people have found people with jobs like we do, working from home, they don't have to be in the office. So suddenly the whole idea of living out in the country, as long as there's good internet, not only becomes more attractive, but it suddenly becomes possible and practical. That's just one change that I'm hearing about. What more do you hear of?
Well, and I've been such a huge advocate, Peter, on small businesses and people owning their own business.
Right.
I think we reach our own dreams and our own goals in life by owning our own business. If we can work for an employer, we can definitely work for ourselves, right? And you're right. I mean, I'm in the country as well, like you are, and Kathleen, and it's like, the schedule is ours to make, and it's not a light schedule. Like we're busy all day long.
Sure.
But it's to reach out to know that you can actually have that for yourself. So I think what's happening is that people are starting to realize, what do I really, really want? So they are making the change, some of them, and some of them are still kind of on the fence. And of course, there's always the ones that won't change. So
yep.
We still have that kind of balance going on. But I think if we're to look at what's really been happening, is that we do need to make changes in our lives, and you can pick the area you need to make a change in. But for those of us that are still working, it's a really big topic of conversation. Do I still work for this employer that I have to travel in? Or do I actually, start my own business because it's something I've always wanted to do?
Sure. Kathleen, you had something similar to that to ask Lucie.
Well, if someone's looking at possibly, or they have even pre-pandemic, wanting or having a dream of starting their own company, would you encourage them to do that now or perhaps wait?
No, I would encourage them to do that now. And I think because everything is very unsettled, so, that's how people are feeling. I think it's a great opportunity while you have a job to start the move, start to think in your mind, what can I do to get that going? I have a job. It's relatively safe, or a lot of people lost their jobs too, right? But I'll go from a personal experience where, starting a business in homeopathy, which is where I was going, I felt it was very tough to do that. And so I ended up giving that up and going to the full-time job. And then and here I am today in the middle of all this going, I should have just followed through on that, right? And so I think we have to look at, there's never going to be a really great time for big life decisions. I think it's that you need to take the leap of faith and just go, if that's what's in your heart. And I think if it's really in your heart, it's really something you want, I think we can attract that. And I think there's no question that it might be a little bit of bumpy roads, or, you can get some moments or some long moments where you're really scared. But in the end, it's worth it to get to where you want to go, for sure.
So if you're working with someone, Lucie, that's hoping to transition into their own business and make that happen, are there specific steps you would suggest they follow before actually taking the leap and quitting either their job, or if they're starting something new? Is there specific steps that you would suggest that they take?
Yeah, I think that they need to have a very clear vision as to where they're going. So we could all say we want to be a magician, let's just say. But what does it take to be the magician? So, there's the experience, there's the schooling, there's where can we get the clients. So there's a lot of skill set when you own your own business. So things like, what we're talking about today, or marketing, Facebook pages, all of that information is to, make this really long list of what do I need to know, and then, learn that as you go along, or have some of those skills already in place. But it's, I think it's very much a systematic approach. That's how I like to do it. That was my first choice, though, for me, was I jumped off the cliff and I just did it. So that was a little scary for a single mom of 2 children, but I did it, and I did very, very well. The second time I went to do it, I didn't jump off the cliff. I thought I should have this systematic approach going. So it really becomes a really individual comfort zone. Like, how much do you need to know before you can let go, right? And some of us are just a little wild and crazy. We'll just let it all go and do it. But there's most of us want to have a little bit more of a stable approach to it, a more system approach to it, so that we feel like we can beat all the odds of failing, right?
Just to extend that one, a lot of people recently have not had the option. They've been pushed off the cliff, right, because of this pandemic. And they have to get moving. They can't sit back and just learn and just analyze. They've got to do something like tomorrow to start paying the bills. So what do you suggest for the people in that position? Hit
the ground running.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was not in a very different position. 20 years ago, I was being downsized. I had 2 young children. I was on my own. It's like, okay, what do I do? I can go grab another job, or it's time for me to do what I've always wanted to do, which was to have my own business. And so, I built a backup plan. And what's the worst case scenario? Might have to go live with my parents with 2 young children, but it never materialized to that because I was determined to make it work. So I was working on that business, 10, 12 hours a day to make it work. And so part of the whole thing is you have to invest a lot of yourself and your time to get a business going. And what are you prepared to give up in the meantime? And I think that's a really big question to ask.
Sure. That's a big question. Yeah. Moving on, Lucie, we hear this term, which to me is an oxymoron, the new normal. If it's new, then it can't really be normal, but that's the phrase that's being bandied about. So what do you understand from that phrase?
I might add. I don't know. It's just I have to interject because I don't know what your opinion is, and we'll hear about that in a moment, Lucie. But it's something that I'm finding more and more grating on my nerves. New normal. Yeah. No, let's not accept this as normal. What are your thoughts?
Well, the question is, what's normal, anyways? I mean, normal is very an individual kind of question.
Sure.
Right? What's normal to me could be not normal to you, right? So I think in the new normal, like, who wants to buy into that? I don't want to buy into that, I don't like the phrase at all. I think we need to say, what is our life? What do you want your life to look like tomorrow or the day after? We don't have to call it normal, because I don't think I'm a normal person by any stretch of the imagination. And I really like to not be called normal, so I don't want to fall into that trap. But I think it's a really big kind of a gimmick that's being said out there for everybody to kind of feel comfortable. And it's like, who are you kidding? It's not me, right? And I think people need to look at, do you want to just fall into the mainstream, what everybody else is doing, or do you want to forge ahead and make your own path to where you want to go? And there's two different kinds of people in the world, right?
Yeah, no, good one. I like that. Back to you, Kathleen.
How have you personally handled this time, Lucie? How have you navigated through these seas in the last several months with the pandemic?
Oh, I've done a lot of my usual thing, which is to hide from the world. No, I've never been a TV watcher or a news watcher, so I've stayed away from the media. Even when I do my Facebook pages, I'm not reading the media, the news at all, because there is nothing that's coming out that's very truthful or accurate. There's all kinds of opinions. And this kind of keeps us all off balance when we don't have the consistent message coming out, and you get all these, the answer could be 20 different things. Where do you go with that? We just get very confused, very scared. And so that doesn't allow us to move forward. It makes us more stuck in our position. Mm-hmm. So I don't do any of that. I don't pay attention to any of that. And conversations about people who aren't really, first of all, educated enough to say, hey, the mask is a good thing or the mask is not a good thing. It's like, I'm not having those conversations. We all have an opinion, but that's not the issue. The issue really is, what have I done during this time period? And I've decided to continue my business full force ahead. I've not stepped back. Obviously, going out, socializing has been significantly reduced, and that's fair. I'm a bit of a hermit anyway, so that didn't really bother me as much. But I ended up going back into that one regret that I had in the last few years. And I spent the last 3 months finishing off my homeopathy and waiting for my registration to come into place. And I'm going to be moving forward in that business completely. So I've taken this opportunity while I'm running a business to start another business. And the Fournier Coaching's been running as well. So I've been really busy looking at myself and going, what do I see my future like? What do I want in my life? And I don't want someone to dictate that to me. I don't want the media to say this is the rest of my life and this new normal is going to be for everybody. I'm going, I'm not buying into that. I'm going, what do I personally want? And I'm making that decision and then going forward with that. So it's a little bit like I'm not paying attention too much to it. I'm just going, what do I want for me? And going for it.
Lucie, I know you and I know that you're such a courageous lady and you do forge ahead, and I have such respect for you because of that. But getting back to business coaching for a moment, and you're very encouraging of people that want to pursue their own businesses to just do it. But what about that person that is so riddled with fear around that, of taking that giant leap? Of taking a risk? How would you coach them through that?
I think and I'm not much different. I mean, I can say after I've gone through it, this is what I've done, but it's about taking one step at a time. It's about doing what you're comfortable with, but it's also knowing that the fear is there and it's going to stop you from moving forward, and then to bite into that fear a little bit. And so the Fournier Coaching's philosophy right now is to lean into life. It's like, I don't want to sit back here anymore. I want to lean into it. How much of it can I go forward with? And it's really an individual thing. I might look like I'm going at it a lot faster than maybe you would, Kathleen, but we're still going to get there. Mm-hmm. And right? And it's not a race. It's about what step can you take today to get you forward. And it doesn't matter that it's slow. It just matters that you're moving. And that's my philosophy. So a little bit of time is perfectly fine. And that's great. And it'll get you where you need to go. But those of us that sit in fear, and what can you do when you sit in fear and don't want to move at all? It's just about what little thing can you do to feel like you've moved. And that's just perfectly fine too.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Back to you, Peter.
Just picking up on that, I think, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular, but when I look at a lot of the coaching, inverted commas, because not your coaching, but lifestyle advice that we see on the internet, sort of gives people the impression that it doesn't matter who you are, you can succeed at virtually any type of business on your own. And the reality is not everybody can succeed at every type of business, right? So I hear what you're saying, but I think my experience has been that some people will not overcome the fear to move in a certain direction, and it might be totally destructive for them to be pushed in that direction, but they might be very confident, competent, and comfortable eventually, and successful in a different direction, and not one that's publicly promoted as much. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's my feeling is this: if you're feeling like you're stuck, or you're feeling like there's a lot of fear stopping you from moving forward, that's when I think it's really important to reach out. Mm-hmm. To talk to a coach, because when we feel the fear, we tend to be cluttered or confused. There's a lot of fog there because the fear puts it up in front of us, right? And if you can have like one session with a coach and just clear the way, clear the fog, so you can have a list of things to go and do, then that's helpful. Sure. But I agree with you, Peter. We're not all good at doing. I would never be really great at doing a podcaster's job like yours. Like, yeah, no.
Oh, I beg to differ.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, but anyway.
But I think it's like you want to find that one thing that just makes your heart sing, and you're good at it anyways. So it's really about not doing the things that people think will get you to the business that'll make you a ton of money. It's about doing the thing that warms up your heart.
Absolutely.
And the wealth comes from doing it because you love it and it resonates with you. And that's a really healthy and financially best spot to start a business. But if you're going to go do a business, somebody says it's really great, like, I don't even know what that is anymore, but something that doesn't resonate with you, then I'd say don't. Because if your heart's not in it, it's just not going to work.
No, you're right there.
So Lucie, what are the advantages of working with a coach then?
I think the coach for me, because I've had a coach all the way through my entire business. And I've been in business well over 20 years. And I've had different coaches for different reasons as well. And I think it depends on what you're looking for. But one of the things that I found very, very useful for me was the clarity that coach was able to bring to me. Because you can get muddled up in your own process that's not really turning the way other people might think, or you think linearly, or they may think more broad, So it's the perspective that they bring to you that helps. Yeah. Because you can just go in circles and circles about what you want to do. But somebody who's totally objective can come in and go, but did you think about this? Or did you think about that? And you're kind of going, no, I didn't. Right? So it's just that one person that's completely objective, has a totally different perspective, and can shine the light on where the fear is, or where you're stuck. And enough that it'll show you the road, even for another kilometer even, or another 10 feet. It doesn't really matter, but gets you moving, right?
Well, I say this to our audience for a fact, because you and I have had long discussions, and you've coached me, and I think the world of you, Lucie, because you've been able to just Just been able to put some perspective on my views and help me navigate where I needed to go. And just, you've been so helpful. So I thank you for that. Peter?
I appreciate it.
I got one to ask you, and I'm sure many of our audience would be interested in your answer to this one. What's the difference between coaching and counseling?
Well, I find counseling is, it's more, there's two. Okay, so counseling for me is going back in your past and dealing with things that happened to you when you were younger. So, whether it's happened at school or happened in a relationship. In coaching, I've always found it to be very forward movement. Mm-hmm. You don't have to grab the past to bring it with you, which sometimes feels like a bit of an anchor, right? It's like deciding and going this way and not looking backwards. And I had this, I said this expression the other day to somebody, and it was like, we're not looking in the rearview mirror when we're driving our car.
Sure.
So stop, right? We're looking through the front, and that's coaching and counseling for me, the two. Mm-hmm. Now, I think they're both very, very important, and not to demean one over the other. Counseling, obviously, for people that need more help, or who maybe need more medical treatment. Definitely, counseling is very, very important. But I tend to want to inspire people and empower them to move forward, not to kind of go back in their background to figure out where they got here.
Right.
So it depends on, some people like the counseling, but for me, coaching has always helped me propel myself forward. And I like that.
Interesting. And coaching is generally one-on-one, but counseling, I'm thinking of a branch like marriage counseling would be one-on-two, right?
Right. Well, you can have more than one person in the coaching group as well.
Sure.
So some of my programs, or all of them actually, you can do it one-on-one, or you can get a group of friends or family together, or a group of people you don't know. And if we're all talking, about the same thing, like starting a small business, sure, then it's fine to all get together. If you want it to be much more customized and individual, then yes, the one-on-one makes a lot more sense.
More sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I know I wanted to ask you something else in a moment, but I think Kathleen might have something before that. Do you?
Well, I was just thinking about the coaching, business versus personal. Can you chat a little bit about personal coaching? And so when would somebody come to you for personal coaching?
Okay. I actually have two programs for personal coaching. So one is called Personal, and the other one's called Mindfulness, where we have so much going on in our minds that we're having trouble to keep it empty. But personal for me is about more personal goals, as in I want to change my career, or maybe I want to leave my husband, or I want to go back to school. So it becomes more of a goal-oriented coaching. So it's about helping that person move forward in achieving those goals. Where the mindfulness coaching for me has been about just me, myself, and I. So how I feel today, emotionally or mentally, and having that, no big issues going on other than just, I want to love myself more. I want to do more for myself. I want to put myself first. So that's how I define the two. They're obviously both about you, but one is more goal oriented, whereas the other one is just taking care of me, putting myself first.
Okay, got it. What I wanted to ask you was, in the times we live in right at the moment, two questions in one, in fact. What would you tell people to do more of, and what would you tell people to do less of? And I can think of a couple of good ones in the second part of that, but I'm over to you. You tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, I just had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, and I'm a strong believer in journaling. So I strongly recommend that people get up a little bit earlier in the morning, so even a half an hour, and just write what's in their mind. Mm-hmm. How are they feeling and what's going to go on for the day, but just write, and then do that every morning, because I think that half hour to yourself without distraction, getting the thoughts onto paper, I think it provides clarity. It allows you to tap into your intuition, into what you're feeling in your heart. And I think that journaling is so important. You can go back for weeks or months later and see what you've written and see your progress. And I was saying this to somebody the other day, and I tell my kids this: when I die, you'll see hundreds of journals in my house. Don't read any of them. Just put them in a bonfire and light a match, because it's not about, it's just their intimate thoughts. But it's helped me progress. All right. And so there's not enough time, or people aren't taking enough time to introspectively go inside themselves and ask themselves the question. You know, we're always going for an answer here or reading something there to feed us, but the answers are always within us. But we don't spend enough time asking ourselves, what is it, right? And so that would lead to your other question, which is what would you tell people to stop doing? It's like, I think it's really about listening to everybody else.
Yeah.
I think it's about finding your own truth. I think it's about being authentic to yourself. And that does not require somebody else to answer that question for you. Right?
Yep.
So it's really about taking the time to spend some time quietly with yourself. And I think for me, I write because otherwise my thoughts just go around and around in circles. So the writing helps me put it on a piece of paper and it's done. And then I can move on with my day. But when I know I'm struggling, when I have to ask somebody, what should I do next? Then I know I'm into trouble. Then, I have to write more than a couple pages.
Good. No, that's good. And I'm a great supporter of that idea. I have piles. I don't go for expensive stuff. I have piles of these. I mean, I've got boxes full. And the same thing, I have a letter in my filing cabinet for my eldest son. Said, when I die, you go and look for all these books and put them on the bonfire. Like you said.
I think it's awesome. You know, during the first period of COVID when we weren't allowed to go anywhere, I put an order in at Staples. I don't have one close to me, but it's writing books, a Cambridge notebook, and it's about this long.
Yeah.
And it's got like 500 pages in it, and it's got the ring on it like that. And I love them for writing because you can flip them. And I ordered 10.
I can believe it. I go to Staples and buy 3 at a time because I use 2. I use one as a journal and I use one as a daily planner. So I always have 2 on the go and a few other books that I write in as well.
Me too. They're all over the place.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really good. We're getting on in time. So I'm going to go back to Kathleen.
So Lucie, tell our audience how they can get a hold of you.
You can have a look at my websites where the programs are outlined there, and that's www.fourniercoaching.com. I do have a spiritual website as well, and that's fournierholistichealing.com. Or you can just call me directly, 613-803-6390. But the website will give you a lot of information. I have developed programs for people if they want to follow a little bit of a system. But I think after maybe the first or second session, people will want to just do their own thing. But the programs are there, the topics are there. You can have a look at all the programs and choose the ones that that apply to you.
Kathleen, before you finish, that's reminding me of something else I wanted to ask Lucie. Let me just get rid of this notice that's come up on my screen telling us we have a few minutes left. We have a couple of minutes left. You just mentioned spiritual coaching, Lucie. I came to religion very late in life, having been away from it for many, many years. And I have a responsibility to look after a little rural church, of which I'm the second youngest member, despite the great...
That's so awesome.
And churches are going through a huge transition, having just going back to live worship, having been on Zoom, and some are still on Zoom and some not. But the whole thing is up in the air. So I'm starting with religion, but I'm encompassing that in the overall spiritual thing. What's happened, that's affected the way a lot of people worship, become spiritual, practice spirituality, religion. What are you seeing as a spiritual coach? What's the effect of that on people?
I'm thinking that people are they're realizing they need to pivot. And I'll say pivot, and I'll explain that. It's because we're so accustomed to going to church, right? In a building, and thinking that God's in the building. And I remember having this discussion with my mom when she was alive, and I had them numerous times because I was the only child that was quite vocal. You can imagine why. And her and I would have discussions about this, and it was really like, I said, Mom, God's not in a church. We don't need to be in the church. I mean, the church is nice because we can congregate. God's outside in my backyard, right? And so I think this is where the churches are going to start to really spread the word, or increase their spirituality message by realizing it doesn't need to be in these 4 walls.
Right.
And it's like a revelation, right? And it's like, are you kidding me? And so everything we've been doing for the last 6 months, we've had to pivot. but churches primarily really have to pivot because they've only had one way of doing it. And so now I've been looking at some of them online where the priest, or I don't even know if it's a priest, I don't know the denomination it was, but he was giving a sermon on Zoom, and I'm going, awesome, you know, you can reach so much more people.
Absolutely.
And this is what's been happening with the churches, right? Is like less and less people are actually walking in, right? And so in order to reach more people, then you need to open that up in different ways. And I think this is really proving to be, now's the chance to do that.
It's happening a lot. Anyway, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to go back to Kathleen to do her little bit at the end.
Well, thank you so much, Lucie, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to interview you. You're a fantastic friend, and I adore you. Thank you again, and we hope to have you again on the show down the road. And thank to all of our audience for tuning in. We so appreciate you. And once again, if any of you is interested in being a guest on the show, please don't hesitate to reach out to Peter or myself. So until next time, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Lucie.